The ceremonial hall of the warship Crimson Valor echoed with the roars of approval as Commander Varan raised his arm high. Deep gashes crisscrossed his scaled forearm, each one a story from the battlefield. The Regathi warriors surrounding him beat their fists against their chest plates in rhythm, creating a thunderous sound that vibrated through the metal floors. This one. Varan traced a jagged line across his shoulder. From the siege of Portal Ridge, 3 days of combat. The enemy commander himself gave me this mark before I took his head. More roars. More celebration. This was the way of the Coalition's warrior races. Scars were not merely wounds healed. They were badges of glory, proof of survival, evidence of courage. The Regathi especially took pride in their marks. Their reptilian skin healed thick and prominent, creating raised lines that caught the light. Every warrior could recite the story of every scar on their body. In the corner of the hall, largely ignored by the celebrating warriors, Dr. Simon Reed watched quietly. He had arrived on the Crimson Valor only 3 hours ago, fresh from Earth's medical corps. The transport shuttle had barely finished docking before he was summoned to this gathering. A welcome ceremony, they called it. So far, nobody had actually welcomed him. Simon was unremarkable by most standards. Average height for a human, graying hair at his temples, wearing simple medical scrubs beneath a standard-issue jacket. He carried no weapons, bore no rank insignia beyond the small medical symbol on his collar. Among these towering warriors, covered in ceremonial armor and battle scars, he looked like a clerk who had wandered into the wrong room. And you, a young Regathi warrior named Drask, stepped forward, pointing at Simon. The hall fell silent. You are the human they sent to teach us medicine? Simon met his gaze calmly. I'm here to serve as a medical liaison, yes. Drask laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. Look at him, soft skin. Barely any marks at all. This is what Earth sends? A creature who has never seen real battle? Several warriors joined the laughter. Simon remained still, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. He had expected this. The reports about Coalition culture had been thorough. Our medics preserve honor, Drask continued, walking in a circle around Simon. When we treat a wound, we ensure the scar remains. The story stays written on the flesh. But I have heard humans try to erase their wounds, to hide their shame. We don't see it as shame, Simon said quietly. Then what do you call it? Drask demanded. Medicine, the word hung in the air. Corvus, the chief medical officer, stepped forward before the situation could escalate. He was older than most warriors present. His scales dulled with age, but his body covered in more scars than anyone else in the room, hundreds of them layered over decades of service. The human will observe our methods first, Corvus announced. He will learn our ways before we consider his techniques. That is the arrangement. Drask nodded, satisfied, and returned to his place among the other warriors. The ceremony continued, though many kept glancing at Simon with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. After another hour of scar displays and battle stories, the warriors finally dispersed. Corvus approached Simon with steady, measured steps. Do not take offense, Corvus said. They respect strength. You will need to prove yours. I'm not here to prove anything, Simon replied. I'm here to help. Corvus studied him for a moment.
Help how?
By making warriors ashamed of their marks? By erasing the evidence of their survival? Simon shook his head. That's not what I do. Then what do you do, human? Before Simon could answer, an alarm shrieked through the ship. Red lights flashed along the corridors. A voice crackled over the communication system, urgent and sharp. Medical emergency. Hangar Bay 7. Multiple casualties. All medical personnel report immediately. Corvus moved instantly, his old body still quick when needed. Simon was right behind him, his hand already reaching for the medical kit he had brought. They ran through the corridors, following the emergency markers. Other medics joined them, all Regathi, all carrying the standard Coalition medical equipment. The hangar bay was chaos. A cargo loader had malfunctioned during a training exercise, its massive mechanical arm swinging wildly before crushing 2 maintenance platforms. Warriors and crew members lay scattered across the deck, some moving, some horribly still. The smell of burned metal and blood filled the air, 6 wounded. Simon's mind automatically began triaging as he ran forward. His eyes moved from one casualty to the next, assessing injuries with practiced speed. 2 critical. 4 serious but stable. The critical ones would need immediate intervention or they would die. Regathi medics were already working, their movements efficient but focused on stopping bleeding and stabilizing spines. They worked around the injuries, treating symptoms without trying to fully repair damage. Preserve life, accept scars. That was their way. Simon spotted the worst case immediately. A young Sulathi warrior, insectoid in appearance, his chitinous arm completely severed at the shoulder. The Ragathi medic beside him had applied pressure to the stump, foam sealant hardening around the wound. The severed arm lay 3 meters away, preparing amputation site for cauterization, the medic announced. "Wait," Simon said, dropping to his knees beside them. The medic looked up, confused. "The limb is lost. We preserve the warrior." Simon was already opening his medical kit, pulling out instruments the Ragathi had never seen before. Microsurgical tools, synthetic grafts, neural connector arrays. His hands moved with absolute certainty, no hesitation, no wasted motion. "I can save the arm," Simon said. Corvus arrived, breathing hard from the run. He saw what Simon was doing and his eyes widened. "The wound is too severe. The arm has been separated for nearly 4 minutes. Tissue death has begun. We follow protocol. Amputate cleanly, seal the wound, let the warrior wear his survival with pride." Simon looked up at him. His eyes were calm, but there was steel underneath the calm. "I didn't come all this way to watch people lose pieces of themselves when I can save them." He turned back to the wounded Sulathi. His scarred hands reached for the severed limb. "Someone bring me that arm, now." Blood pooled on the hangar deck, spreading in slow circles around the wounded. The Sulathi warrior named Nilith lay unconscious, his severed arm now beside him as Simon worked with focused intensity. 2 hours had passed since the accident. 2 hours of surgery performed on cold metal flooring while the ship hummed around them. Simon's hands moved like they were performing a dance they had practiced 1,000 times. Microsutures connected blood vessels thinner than human hair. Synthetic nerve grafts bridged the gaps in Nilith's neural pathways. The tools from Earth's medical technology were far more precise than anything the Coalition used, designed for reconstruction rather than simple survival. Around him, Ragathi medics watched in silence. They had finished treating the other casualties an hour ago. 4 warriors bandaged and sent to recovery, 1 stabilized and waiting for surgery tomorrow. But they had stayed to watch Simon work on what they considered a lost cause. "Impossible," one medic whispered. The arm was separated too long. "He is reconnecting individual nerve bundles," another said, disbelief clear in his voice. "That would take days in our medical bay. He does it in minutes." Corvus stood closest, his old eyes missing nothing. He watched Simon's hands especially. They were covered in thin surgical gloves, but even through the material, Corvus could see marks, scars, dozens of them, crisscrossing Simon's fingers and palms in neat, deliberate patterns. Finally, after another 30 minutes, Simon sat back. Sweat covered his forehead. His hands trembled slightly from the extended precision work. But the arm was reattached, bone connected to bone, muscle to muscle, nerves carefully aligned and sealed. "It will take time to heal fully," Simon said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "But he'll have function back. Maybe 90% of what he had before. He'll be able to hold a weapon, work controls, live his life." One of the Ragathi medics stepped forward, scanning Nilith's arm with a medical device. His eyes widened as he read the results. "The cellular connection is holding. Blood flow restored, neural activity registering." He looked up at Simon. "This should not be possible." "It's possible," Simon said simply. "Just difficult." Corvus helped Simon stand. The human doctor stumbled slightly, catching himself against a nearby crate. The surgery had drained him completely. "Take the patient to medical bay," Corvus ordered. "Monitor him closely. I want to know the moment he wakes." 4 medics carefully lifted Nilith onto a transport stretcher and carried him away. The hangar slowly emptied until only Corvus and Simon remained. The blood on the floor was already being cleaned by maintenance drones. "You robbed him," Corvus said quietly. Simon looked at him, confused. "I saved his arm. You robbed him of an honorable mark. That warrior will wake with a reattached limb. The scar will be minimal, hidden beneath his chitin. His squad will mock him. They will say he was lucky, not strong. That he survived without truly surviving." Simon was silent for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice firm despite his exhaustion. "He'll be able to hold his children. Use his weapon. Eat without assistance. That's what I saved. If his squad mocks him for that, then his squad is made of fools." Corvus's scales rippled, a sign of anger among his people. But before he could respond, Simon continued. I've read your cultural files. I understand what scars mean to you. Proof of battle. Evidence of strength. A story written on flesh. He held up his hands. But let me tell you what scars mean to me. For the first time, Corvus really looked at Simon's hands. Under the harsh hanger lights, they were clearly visible now that Simon had removed his surgical gloves. The scars were everywhere. Thin lines across every finger, small marks on his palms, a longer cut along his left wrist. They were precise, deliberate, not the random marks of combat. What are those? Corvus asked. Practice, Simon said. Every one of these scars represents hours of training. I cut my own flesh to learn how to repair it. I tested suture techniques on myself. I mapped nerve pathways by trial and error. Each mark is a lesson learned, a skill perfected, a technique mastered. Corvus stared. You wounded yourself? Deliberately? To become better. To save lives like the one I saved today. Simon looked down at his hands. Where I come from, we had a saying. To heal others, first understand pain. I understood it very well. But why? Corvus demanded. Why harm yourself to help others? Simon met his eyes. Because every time I failed to save someone, every time my hands weren't skilled enough or fast enough, someone died. Someone's family lost them, so I made sure my hands would never fail again. The words hung in the air between them. Corvus thought of his own scars, each one a story of personal survival. He had never considered that scars could represent something else. Something turned outward instead of inward. The other warriors will not understand this, Corvus said finally. I know. They will resent you, call you a thief of honor. I know that too. Then why do it? Simon picked up his medical kit, slinging it over his shoulder. His exhaustion was clear, but his voice remained steady. Because I didn't become a doctor to win popularity contests. I became a doctor to save lives, and I'm very good at my job. He walked toward the hangar exit, leaving Corvus alone with his thoughts. 3 days later, Neelith woke in the medical bay. His first sensation was confusion. His second was the feeling of his reattached arm. He flexed his fingers experimentally. They moved. All of them. He bent his elbow, rolled his shoulder. Pain flared, but everything worked. A Ragathi medic approached his bed. The human doctor saved your arm. It will heal fully in time. Neelith looked down at his arm. The reattachment point was visible, a clean line where Simon had worked. But it was neat, precise, almost invisible beneath his natural chitin patterns. No proud scar, no story to tell, just function restored. His squad arrived an hour later. They gathered around his bed, and Neelith saw the expressions on their faces. Not celebration, not relief, disappointment. I heard what happened, one said. The human fixed you. Fixed, another repeated. Like you were broken equipment. Neelith flexed his hand again, feeling the strength returning. He saved my arm. He stole your honor, the first warrior replied. You should have worn that loss with pride. Showed everyone you survived. Now you just look like nothing happened. They left shortly after. Neelith lay in his bed staring at his arm. It worked perfectly. He could return to duty, resume his life. But among his people he had become something lesser, a warrior who survived without scars to prove it. In his quarters, Simon lay on his bunk staring at his own scarred hands. He knew what was happening. Knew the resentment building among the warriors. He had expected it, but he also knew that Neelith would hold his children again someday. Would fight alongside his squad. Would live a full life. That was enough. It had to be enough. His hands ached from the surgery, old scars throbbing with phantom pain. He flexed his fingers slowly, feeling the familiar discomfort. Each mark a reminder of what he could do, what he had learned to do. Outside his door, footsteps passed. Voices spoke in harsh Ragathi tones. The word for human came up several times. None of it friendly. Simon closed his eyes and let the exhaustion take him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tonight, one warrior still had both his arms. That was the victory that mattered. 3 weeks aboard the Crimson Valor had taught Simon many things about the Coalition's warrior culture. None of them encouraging. Word of Neelith's saved arm had spread through the ship like fire through dry grass. Some younger warriors looked at Simon with curiosity. Most looked at him with contempt, the human who stole scars. The doctor who erased honor. He had performed 7 more surgeries since that first day. Each one successful. Each one controversial. A Ragathi warrior whose shattered leg bone Simon had reconstructed using synthetic lattice work. An Orvathi whose crushed hand Simon had rebuilt nerve by nerve. Every patient regained full function. Every patient faced judgment from their peers for having bodies too perfect, too unmarked. Now Simon stood in the ship's council chamber, summoned for a formal inquiry. The room was circular, with seats rising in tiers around a central floor. Warriors filled every seat. Commander Voran sat highest, his scarred face impassive. Corvus sat beside him, looking uncomfortable. "Dr. Reed," Voran began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber, "you stand accused of violating the cultural practices of the Galactic Coalition. How do you answer?" "I stand accused of practicing medicine," Simon replied calmly. "If that's a violation, then I'm guilty," murmurs rippled through the assembled warriors. Drask stood from his seat. "You mock us." "You mock our traditions. I save lives," Simon said. "That's not mockery. That's my job." "You erase the evidence of survival," another warrior called out. "You make warriors ashamed of what they endured." Simon took a breath. He had known this was coming, had prepared for it since the day he arrived. But preparation and execution were different things. "May I tell you a story?" Simon asked. Voran gestured for silence. "Speak." Simon held up his hands, letting everyone see them clearly under the chamber's bright lights. The scars were obvious now. Dozens of thin, precise lines crisscrossing his palms and fingers. "I was 26 years old," Simon began, fresh out of medical school. "Assigned to a trauma center in the middle of a war zone. Earth hadn't joined the coalition yet. We were still fighting ourselves. Human against human. Stupid, brutal, pointless." He lowered his hands but kept his eyes on Voran. "I was a terrible doctor at first. My hands shook during surgery. My sutures were uneven. I was slow, uncertain, afraid. And because of that, people died. Soldiers who should have survived. Civilians who deserved better. Children who never had a chance." The chamber was silent now, every warrior listening. "There was one patient," Simon continued, his voice steady but quiet. "A young soldier, 19 years old. Took shrapnel to the face. I could have saved him. The wounds weren't fatal, but my hands weren't good enough, weren't steady enough. I failed to repair the damage to his facial artery. He bled out on my operating table while I fumbled with tools I barely knew how to use." Simon looked down at his hands again. "That night I decided something. I would never fail like that again. I would become the best surgeon I could possibly be. And if that meant pain, if that meant sacrifice, then so be it." He held up his left hand. "I started practicing on myself. Microsurgery requires absolute precision, so I made small cuts on my own flesh. Then I repaired them. Over and over, thousands of times. Each cut taught me something. How deep to go, how to align tissue, how to make sutures that would hold but not restrict." His right hand came up. "This scar along my wrist. I was learning nerve reattachment. I deliberately severed a minor nerve in my own arm, then reconnected it. Took me 8 hours. I could have gone to another doctor, but I needed to feel it, to understand exactly what my patients would experience." Warriors were leaning forward now, disbelief on many faces. Corvus looked like he had been struck. "Every mark on my hands represents a skill I forced myself to master, a technique I refused to accept as too difficult. A moment when I chose pain over ignorance." Simon's voice grew stronger. "You think I don't understand scars? You think I don't know what it means to carry marks from battle? I have been at war with human limitation for 30 years. These scars are my proof." Voran stood slowly. "You wounded yourself?" "Your own flesh." "Yes, for what purpose?" "So I would never lose another patient I could save." The chamber erupted. Warriors shouting at each other. Some angry, some confused, some calling for respect. Simon stood quietly in the center, waiting for the chaos to settle. It was Nyleth who broke the deadlock. He had been sitting in the upper tiers, his restored arm hidden beneath his uniform. Now he stood and descended to the chamber floor. Every eye turned to him. "Permission to speak," Nyleth said. Voran nodded. "Granted." Nyleth walked to stand beside Simon. Then slowly he raised his reattached arm. "The human saved this. My squad mocked me, called me weak, said I should have worn my loss with pride." He flexed his hand, fingers moving smoothly. "But yesterday we had combat drills. I scored higher than anyone in my unit. This arm works better than my original. Not because it's stronger, but because I appreciate it more." He turned to face the assembled warriors. I thought I lost my honor when this arm was saved. But I was wrong. The human didn't steal my honor. He gave me a chance to earn new honor, to prove myself with action rather than appearance. Silence followed his words. Then another warrior stood, an old veteran named Grath, his body covered in more scars than anyone else on the ship. He rarely spoke, but when he did, warriors listened. I have fought for 40 years, Grath said, his voice like gravel. I wear my scars with pride. Each one is a story of survival. He paused, looking directly at Simon. But I have also lost many brothers in battle. Good warriors who died from wounds that left impressive scars but stopped their hearts. Warriors who survived their fights but not their injuries. Grath descended to the floor. If this human had been with us in those battles, would those warriors still live? With full function? Able to return to their families? No one answered. Then perhaps, Grath continued, we have been confusing scars with honor for too long. Perhaps true honor is in survival with purpose, not survival with proof. The chamber erupted again, but the tone had changed. Arguments now instead of accusations. Debate instead of condemnation. Varan raised his hand for silence. It took several minutes to achieve. When the chamber finally quieted, he looked down at Simon. Your methods are effective, that is clear, but they challenge everything we believe about warrior culture. I'm not trying to change your culture, Simon said. I'm trying to give your warriors more options. Keep your scars if they matter to you. But don't sacrifice function for appearance. Don't choose disability over healing just to tell a story. Varan considered this. Then he nodded slowly. We will table this inquiry for now. But understand, human, you are being watched. I'm always being watched, Simon replied. That's fine. Watch me save lives. Before Varan could respond, the ship's alarm system activated, not the emergency medical alert. Something worse. The combat alert. Red lights flooded the chamber. A voice crackled over the communication system. All hands to battle stations. Enemy forces engaged. Multiple casualties incoming. Medical bay, prepare for mass trauma. Varan locked eyes with Simon. Can your methods handle war, human? Simon was already moving toward the exit. We're about to find out. The medical bay transformed within minutes. Beds extended from walls. Surgical equipment powered up with familiar hums. Ragathi medics moved with practiced efficiency, but Simon could see the tension in their movements. This was not a training accident. This was war. The first casualties arrived on stretchers carried by medics from the dropships. Burns covered most of their bodies. Plasma weapons were not kind. The smell hit Simon immediately, bringing back memories of Earth's conflicts. Burned flesh smelled the same regardless of species. Triage stations 1 through 4, Corvus shouted. Prioritized by survival probability. Critical cases to surgery immediately. Simon was already moving, his medical kit in hand. He went to the nearest casualty, a Ragathi warrior whose entire left side had been scorched black. The warrior was conscious, screaming in pain. Plasma burn 70% of torso, the medic beside him reported. We're preparing pain suppressors and... Get me synthetic skin grafts, Simon interrupted. And neural blocks for the damaged tissue. He's going into shock. The medic hesitated. We don't use grafts. The scarring is part of... He'll die from infection before he can show anyone his scars, Simon snapped. Grafts now, the medic ran. Simon's hands were already working, clearing burned tissue, exposing viable flesh beneath. His movements were fast but precise. Every second mattered. More casualties poured in. The medical bay became chaos. 12 wounded in the first wave. Then 20. Then 35. Simon lost count. He moved from patient to patient, his hands never stopping. A Salathi with a shattered thorax. An Orvathi missing half her face. A young Ragathi whose legs had been crushed by falling debris. Hours passed in a blur. Simon performed emergency surgery on a table in the center of the bay, surrounded by medics who watched his techniques and tried to copy them. He taught while he worked, explaining each step in simple terms. Don't just stop the bleeding, he said while reconnecting blood vessels in a warrior's arm. Restore the flow. Preserve the function. Speed matters, but precision matters more. 14 hours into the crisis, Commander Varan himself was brought in. Simon looked up from the patient he was treating and felt his stomach drop. Varan's chest armor was gone, ripped away by weapons fire. Beneath it, his torso was a mess of damaged scales and exposed muscle. A plasma blast had caught him directly. Critical, the medic with him reported. Respiratory compromise. Internal bleeding. He insisted on staying in combat until, "Put him on table 3, Simon ordered. "I'm coming." He finished suturing his current patient, a process that took another 5 minutes. His hands were steady despite the exhaustion creeping into his muscles. 14 hours of surgery without rest. His back ached. His eyes burned. But warriors were dying. He moved to Varan's table. The commander was conscious but barely. His breathing was shallow, labored. He looked up at Simon with eyes that held pain but also pride. "No human tricks," Varan managed to say. "Let me bear the mark." "You can't bear marks if you're dead," Simon replied, already assessing the damage. It was severe, worse than he had first thought. The plasma had burned through 3 layers of tissue. Varan's primary lung was compromised. 2 major blood vessels were damaged. Without immediate intervention, he had maybe 20 minutes. Corvus appeared beside Simon. "I can take this one. You're exhausted." "I'm fine," Simon said. He wasn't fine. His hands were starting to shake. But he was the best surgeon in this bay, and Varan needed the best. He began working. The surgery was complex, requiring techniques the Ragathi had never seen. Simon used synthetic tissue patches to repair the damaged lung. He grafted blood vessels using biomaterial that would integrate with Ragathi physiology. He rebuilt Varan's chest layer by layer, preserving as much natural tissue as possible. But he faced a choice. He could heal Varan completely, using advanced techniques that would leave minimal scarring. Or he could compromise, allowing some scarring to remain while still saving his life. Simon thought about the cultural importance of scars, about how Varan had spoken of them with such reverence, about how the entire warrior culture was built around visible proof of survival. He made his decision. Simon performed the surgery perfectly, restoring full function to Varan's chest. But in the final stages, he did something unusual. He deliberately created a scar pattern over the healed tissue. Not random damage, not accidental marking. He carefully shaped the scar tissue into a specific pattern, one he had seen in Ragathi cultural files. The symbol for survival through strength of will, a mark of honor among their people. It took an extra hour, an hour Simon barely had left in him. But when he finished, Varan's chest bore a clear, prominent scar in the traditional design. Healed but marked, functional but honored. Simon stepped back from the table, swaying slightly. Corvus caught his arm, steadying him. "You created a scar on purpose," Corvus said quietly. "He needed it," Simon replied. "Not medically, but in every other way." Around them, the medical bay was finally starting to empty. The wave of casualties had slowed. 32 warriors saved, 15 who would have died under traditional treatment now stable and recovering. The air still smelled of blood and burned flesh, but the chaos had subsided into exhausted quiet. Simon looked down at his hands. They were covered in blood, both red human blood from where his old scars had reopened and the various colors from alien species. His hands shook uncontrollably now, the adrenaline finally fading. Corvus gently took his hands, examining them. "These are bleeding again." "They do that," Simon said. "When I push too hard, the old scars open up. Reminds me of my limits." "Your limits seem quite far," Corvus observed. He began cleaning Simon's hands carefully. 14 hours of surgery. 17 patients personally treated. Countless lives saved. Simon tried to focus, but his vision was blurring. "Is everyone stable?" "Yes, thanks to you." "Thanks to all of us," Simon corrected. "Your medics learned fast. They were using my techniques by hour 6. Corvus finished bandaging Simon's hands. "Sit. You're about to collapse." Simon did collapse, but not before Varan's eyes opened on the table behind them. The commander looked down at his chest, saw the carefully crafted scar, and something changed in his expression. Understanding, perhaps, or respect. He tried to speak, but Corvus stopped him. "Rest, Commander. The human saved your life." "No," Varan said quietly. "He saved my honor, too." Simon heard the words before darkness took him. He had been awake and operating for 14 straight hours. His body finally demanded payment. He slumped in his chair, unconscious, before Corvus could catch him. The last thing he remembered was the feeling of his hands throbbing where the old scars had reopened. Every mark a life saved, every scar a story, not of glory but of purpose. The medical bay continued around him, warriors recovering, medics working, and in the center of it all, a human doctor who had showed them a different kind of strength. The kind that left scars not from receiving wounds, but from refusing to let others suffer them. 2 days after the battle, Simon woke in a medical bed. His hands were properly bandaged and he felt the familiar ache of healing tissue. Someone had treated his reopened scars while he slept. Done a good job too, judging by the neat dressing. He sat up slowly. The medical bay was quiet now. Most of the wounded transferred to recovery wards. A few serious cases remained, monitored by medics who moved between beds with quiet efficiency. "You're awake?" Corvus appeared beside him. "Good. Commander Voran has been asking for you." "How long was I out?" 43 hours. Your body demanded rest and we let it have it." Corvus helped Simon to his feet. "Your hands will heal. I used some of your own techniques. I hope that was acceptable." Simon looked at the bandages. "More than acceptable." "Thank you." They walked through the corridors toward Voran's recovery room. Warriors they passed looked at Simon differently now. Some with respect, some with confusion, all with recognition. The human who had worked for 14 hours straight, who had saved their commander, who had bled from his own old wounds while healing theirs. Voran's room was private, reserved for senior officers. The commander sat upright in his bed, bare-chested, looking down at the scar Simon had created. The pattern was clear even through the healing tissue. A traditional Regathi symbol of honor, deliberately placed. "Human," Voran greeted him. "Sit, we must talk." Simon sat in the chair beside the bed. His hands still ached, but the pain was manageable. "Familiar. You gave me a scar," Voran said without preamble. "A specific one. Why?" "You needed it," Simon replied honestly. "Not for your health. Your chest is fully functional. The damage is repaired, but you needed that mark. For your culture. For your people. For yourself." Voran traced the scar with one clawed finger. "You could have healed me perfectly. Left no mark at all. I could have. But that would have been cruel in a different way. You would have survived but felt diminished, lost something that mattered to you. So you compromised your methods." Simon shook his head. "No, I expanded them. Medicine isn't just about physical healing. It's about understanding what the patient needs. You needed this scar, so I gave it to you." Voran was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked up at Simon. "Tell me about your hands. The truth of them." Simon unwrapped the bandages slowly. The scars were visible, some old and white, some fresh and pink. "Which truth?" "There are many. All of them," so Simon told him. He started at the beginning, with the soldier who died on his table. The decision to train himself to perfection? The thousands of practice cuts. The deliberate nerve severance to learn reattachment. But he went further this time, sharing things he rarely spoke about. "There was a hospital," Simon said quietly, "during Earth's final war, a field hospital in a city that was under siege. I was working there with 40 other doctors. We were treating civilians mostly, children, families." His hands tightened on the bandages. "The building was hit, bombed. I was in the basement surgical unit when it happened. The ceiling collapsed. Debris everywhere. I was pinned under rubble, my hands crushed between concrete slabs." Voran leaned forward, listening intently. "I was trapped for hours," Simon continued. "Couldn't move. Couldn't see. But I could hear people screaming. Other survivors trapped in the wreckage. Some of them were my patients. Children I had been treating before the bombing." He looked down at his hands. "I had a piece of metal. Sharp debris, and I realized my hands were the only thing keeping me pinned. So I performed surgery on myself in complete darkness. By touch alone, I cut away damaged tissue, relocated bone fragments, reduced swelling, anything to compress my hands enough to pull them free." "How long?" Voran asked. 3 hours. 3 hours of cutting my own flesh, feeling my way through the anatomy, trying not to damage anything permanently." Simon flexed his fingers, remembering. "I got free. My hands were destroyed but functional enough. And then I spent the next 12 hours digging people out and treating their injuries. 12 hours with ruined hands. 17 people survived because of those 12 hours. 16 children and 1 doctor who would have bled out in the rubble. My hands healed eventually. Most of the function came back. Enough to keep working." Simon looked up at Voran. "Every scar on my hands is a story, but not about my glory. About someone I saved, someone I learned to save, someone I refused to let die." Voran stared at him. Then slowly he extended his arm, the one covered in battle scars, each one a story of personal survival. He held it next to Simon's scarred hand. I have worn these marks with pride, Voran said. Each one a memory of combat, of enemies defeated, of glory earned, he paused. But your marks tell a different story. Not of taking life, but preserving it. Not of personal survival, but ensuring the survival of others. He withdrew his arm. I thought your scars were lesser. I was wrong. They are far greater than mine. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Then Nilith entered, followed by several other warriors. Young ones mostly. Those who had witnessed Simon's techniques and been saved by them. Commander, Nilith said formally, we have a request. Voran nodded for him to continue. We wish to learn from the human. Not just medical techniques, but philosophy. We want to understand what it means to bear scars not for ourselves, but for others. More warriors appeared at the door, Drask among them. The young Regathi who had mocked Simon on his first day looked different now. Humbled perhaps, I was wrong about you, human, Drask said. I judged your unmarked skin and saw weakness. I should have looked at your hands and seen strength. An old warrior pushed through the crowd. Grath, the veteran who had spoken at the inquiry. Human doctor, I have a request of my own. My granddaughter serves in the fleet. She was injured badly 2 cycles ago. They saved her life but not her mobility. Her spine was damaged. She cannot walk without assistance. He looked at Simon with eyes that held both hope and desperation. Could you examine her? Could your methods help? Simon remembered his exhaustion, his reopened scars, the 14-hour surgery that had pushed him to his absolute limit. Then he looked at Grath's face and saw something he recognized, the look of someone who had accepted loss but couldn't stop hoping for something better. Send her to me, Simon said. I'll see what I can do. Grath's relief was visible. Thank you. Thank you. More warriors stepped forward, each with a story. A brother who lost his sight, a squad mate with nerve damage, a friend whose hands no longer worked properly, injuries that had been treated but not healed, survival without function, life without wholeness. Simon listened to each one, made notes, promised examinations. His hands ached with fresh pain, but he ignored it. This was what he had come for, not to change their culture but to expand their options, not to steal scars but to restore what had been lost. Voran watched it all from his bed. Finally, he raised his hand for silence. The warriors immediately quieted. The human has shown us something important, Voran said. Scars are not the enemy. Loss of function is the enemy. Unnecessary suffering is the enemy. We can honor our marks while still seeking to be whole. He stood, which caused several medics to rush forward in concern. He waved them away. I am calling for a new ceremony. Tomorrow evening, in the main hall, we will honor those who bear scars. But we will also honor those who prevent them. Voran looked at Simon. And we will ask the human to show his hands to all warriors, so they may understand what true sacrifice looks like. Simon wanted to protest. His scars were personal, private, not meant for display. But he saw the importance in Voran's eyes. This was a bridge being built, a connection between 2 very different philosophies. I'll be there, Simon agreed. The warriors filed out slowly, leaving Simon and Voran alone again. The commander sat back down on his bed, wincing slightly. Your hands tell stories, Voran said quietly. Tomorrow you will share those stories, and my people will finally understand what honor truly means. Simon rewrapped his bandages carefully. Each loop of cloth covered a mark of purpose, each scar a choice made, not to survive but to ensure others would survive. Tomorrow he would stand before warriors who valued marks of battle, and he would show them marks of a different war. One fought not against enemies but against death itself. A war he had been fighting for 30 years. A war written on his hands. The main hall filled slowly as evening approached. Warriors from every deck made their way to the ceremony, their armor polished and their scars displayed with pride. This was a sacred tradition among the coalition forces. The showing of marks, the telling of stories, the celebration of survival. But tonight was different. Word had spread about what Commander Voran intended. A human would be honored, a doctor whose hands bore marks not from battle but from healing. Many warriors came out of curiosity. Some came out of respect. A few came hoping to see the human humiliated. Simon stood in a side chamber, preparing himself. His hands were unwrapped now, the scars visible in the bright lights. Corvus stood beside him, silent support. You don't have to do this, Corvus said. Your work speaks for itself. Voran thinks this is important, Simon replied. And maybe he's right. Maybe they need to see that strength takes many forms. The sound of drumming began in the main hall. The ceremony was starting. Corvus led Simon to the entrance, then stepped aside. Simon walked into the hall alone. Hundreds of warriors filled the tiered seats, their eyes following his movement. The drumming stopped. Silence fell like a weight. Commander Varan stood in the center of the hall, his chest bare to show the scar Simon had given him. The mark was healing well, the pattern clear and proud. Beside him stood Neelith, his restored arm displayed. And Grath, the old veteran, stood to the other side. "Warriors of the Coalition," Varan's voice rang out. "We gather to honor those who bear the marks of battle. Each scar a story, each mark a memory of survival." The traditional words. Simon had heard them before during his first ceremony, but Varan wasn't finished. "Today we also honor a different kind of mark, a different kind of story." Varan gestured to Simon. "Human doctor, show them your hands." Simon walked to the center of the hall. Under the lights, with hundreds of warriors watching, he raised his hands. Palm up so every scar was visible. The thin lines across his fingers. The marks on his palms. The longer cut along his wrist. Years of deliberate injury in service of learning. "Tell them," Varan said. "Tell them the story of your scars." Simon had never been comfortable speaking to crowds. He was a doctor, not a warrior. He saved lives quietly, methodically, without celebration. But these warriors deserved to understand, deserved to know that their lives had been saved by hands that knew pain intimately. He began with the first scar. A small mark on his right index finger. I was 26. A soldier died because I couldn't suture fast enough. That night I started practicing on myself. This scar was the first. I cut my finger, then repaired it. Learned how deep to push the needle, how to tie knots that would hold. He moved to another scar. This one I was learning nerve reattachment. I severed a sensory nerve in my left palm, then reconnected it. Took 8 hours. The pain was extraordinary, but I learned exactly how delicate the work needed to be, how precise. Warrior after warrior leaned forward, listening. Simon continued, moving from scar to scar. Each one a lesson learned. Each one a technique mastered. Each one a step toward becoming the surgeon who could save impossible cases. Finally, he held up his left hand, showing the largest scar. The jagged line across his palm, deeper and rougher than the others. This one happened during the hospital bombing. I was trapped under rubble for 3 hours. My hands were crushed. I could hear children screaming in the darkness. Patients I had been treating. I knew if I didn't get free, they would die. So I operated on my own hands, cut away swelling, moved bone fragments, compressed the tissue enough to pull free. The hall was absolutely silent. I got out. My hands were barely functional, bleeding, damaged, screaming with pain. But 17 people were still alive in that wreckage. 16 children and 1 doctor. So I kept working, dug them out. Treated their injuries, 12 hours of surgery with hands I had just mutilated. Simon lowered his hands. Every person in this room who I've treated, I treated with these hands. Hands that know pain, hands that know sacrifice, hands that chose injury so they would never fail a patient again. He looked up at the assembled warriors. You value scars because they show survival. I understand that. I respect it, but my scars don't show that I survived. They show that I refused to let others die. Varan stepped forward. 2 kinds of honor stand before you. The honor of enduring wounds, and the honor of preventing them. Both require courage. Both require strength. Both deserve respect. He raised his voice. I propose a change to our traditions. Not replacing them, but expanding them. We will continue to honor those who bear the marks of battle, but we will also honor those whose marks come from protecting others. The medics who treat wounds. The doctors who restore function. The healers who carry their own pain so others need not. Murmurs ran through the crowd, some approving, some uncertain. Change came slowly to warrior cultures. Then Grath stood. My granddaughter arrived today. The human examined her. He says he can help, that she might walk again without assistance. Not just survive, but live fully. The old warrior's voice shook with emotion. That is honor. That is strength worth celebrating. Drask stood next. I mocked the human when he arrived. Called him weak, unmarked. I see now that I was blind. His marks are the marks of a warrior who fights a different enemy, death itself. And he has won that fight hundreds of times. More warriors stood. Nilith raised his restored arm. This works because of the human scars. Every mark on his hands helped him learn to save mine. One by one, warriors Simon had treated stood, shared their stories, showed their restored function, arms that worked, legs that walked, organs that functioned, lives that continued with wholeness. The tide in the hall shifted. Simon felt it, understanding spreading like light through darkness. An old warrior in the back stood. His body was covered in more scars than anyone else present, earned over 5 decades of combat. When he spoke, everyone listened. I am Vorak. I have fought longer than most of you have lived. My scars are my pride, my history, my proof. He paused. But I have also lost many brothers, warriors who survived battle but not their wounds, who lived but could not truly live. If this human had been with us, how many would still stand? He descended from his seat, walking slowly to the center of the hall. He stood before Simon, studying him. Then deliberately he extended his hand. Not the traditional Ragathi gesture. The human gesture. A handshake. Simon took his hand. Scarred flesh meeting scarred flesh. 2 different kinds of marks. Same purpose underneath. Survival, protection, strength through sacrifice. You honor us, human, Vorak said. Your hands have saved our people. That is worth more than any glory earned in battle. The hall erupted, not in objection but in approval. Warriors beat their fists against their armor, the traditional sign of respect. The sound was deafening. Varan raised his hand for silence. When the hall quieted, he spoke again. From this day forward, the Coalition recognizes 2 forms of honorable scars. Those earned in battle, and those earned in healing. Both will be celebrated. Both will be respected, he looked at Simon. And the human doctor will train our medics in his methods, so that function and honor can coexist, so that our warriors can survive not just with pride but with wholeness. Simon nodded. This was what he had wanted. Not to erase their culture but to expand it. Not to steal their honor but to give them more ways to earn it. 6 months later, the medical bay of the Crimson Valor looked different. Human and Ragathi equipment sat side by side. Medics trained together, learning both preservation and restoration. Warriors still displayed their scars with pride, but now they also sought treatment that preserved function. Grath's granddaughter, Sira, walked through the corridors unaided. Her spine had been repaired through months of careful surgery. She was returning to flight duty, her body bearing scars but fully functional. Nilith had become an advocate for the new medical approach. His squad, who had once mocked him, now requested similar treatments when injured. Function over appearance, purpose over pride. The culture was changing, slowly as all cultural changes must, but changing nonetheless. Simon worked in the medical bay training a group of young medics, both human and alien, learning from each other. His hands moved with steady precision, demonstrating a technique. The scars were still there, would always be there, but now they were understood, not as weakness, not as shame, but as proof of a different kind of battle. A war fought not with weapons but with skill, not against enemies but against loss. A war where victory was measured in lives saved, functions restored, futures preserved. Corvus approached carrying a data pad. The Coalition Medical Command wants to implement your training program fleet-wide. Every ship will have at least 1 doctor trained in restoration techniques. Simon smiled. Good. That's good. They want to name the program after you. No, Simon said firmly. Name it after what it does. The Restoration Initiative, or the Functional Medicine Program. Something that describes the purpose, not the person. Corvus nodded, understanding. That was Simon's way. Quiet service without glory, results over recognition. That evening, Simon sat in his quarters looking at his hands. The scars had healed again, though he knew they would reopen eventually. They always did when he pushed too hard, when someone needed saving and he refused to accept failure. He thought about the warriors he had treated, the lives he had saved, the functions he had restored. Each one a choice. Each one a battle won against death and disability. His hands were scarred, would always be scarred, but they were strong, steady, ready for the next surgery, the next life, the next impossible case that everyone else had given up on. Because that was what the scars meant. Not glory, not survival, but purpose. The willingness to cut his own flesh so others would not lose theirs. The determination to fight death itself using only skill and sacrifice as weapons. Warriors valued scars as honor. They still did. But now they understood that some scars pointed backward to personal glory, while others pointed forward to lives yet to be saved. Both were honor. Both were strength. Both were worthy of respect. And Simon's hands, covered in marks of purpose, would continue their work. Steady, precise, unstoppable, every scar a story, not of glory but of hope.